The following episode most likely contains graphic language, details of violence, and murder, and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast where I talk murder with my mother.
Hey, everybody.
Episode 59.
Crazy.
I know. You guys, we just celebrated our 4-year anniversary, podcast-versary. So thank you to all of you guys for keeping on listening to us and
keeping on.
Yep. But today we're just going to jump right into it today because we know you guys missed us so much. And this case that we're covering today is a little bit different than a case that we would normally cover. So we have brought you guys, I think, 2 other unsolved cases. So the case that we are covering today is technically unsolved. There's layers. So, I know in the true crime community, a lot of people, they don't like listening to unsolved cases because there's no resolution at the end of it. But imagine that this is your life and you literally have a loved one who is murdered and there is never a resolution for you.
Yeah, so you don't like listening to it, but imagine being the family of someone who has to live it every single day.
Exactly. And we know in this beautiful country of ours that the criminals kind of have the upper hand in our justice system. They are the ones who usually kind of come out scot-free.
Yeah, even when they are caught.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a lot of loopholes in our Canadian justice system that allows these offenders to either remain in the communities, do a little bit of time, and then get back out into the community, as so many cases we've touched on.
The majority are repeat offenders.
But the thing is, for these families, when they don't have the resolution, that keeps them in a stage of grief. There's grief. When you lose a loved one, you're going to grieve. There's stages. But when you are the one who now has to bear the burden of finding justice for your loved one, whether it be your child, your parent, your friend, your brother, it doesn't matter. It's something that a family should never have to go through. They should be left to grieve, which is already hard enough to grieve the loss of a loved one, rather than make a million pleas or beg or call the investigators over and over, year after year after year. That is something that in itself is so horrible.
Not to mention being in the community still when the person that perpetrated this crime to your loved one could be the person you're passing on the street. Could be the person in the car next to you.
Or like that you're at the grocery store and they're just pushing the cart beside you. You have no idea.
Well, and that's going to make you feel like so suspicious of everyone and so worried about the people that you have left in your life that could be hurt by this person.
Exactly. So with that, we will just hop right into the episode. This episode, again, a little bit different. We thank you guys so much for listening to us, and we know that we have a lot of local listeners. Our platform has really grown, so we know, there's listeners all over the place. But what we're going to ask of you guys today is to listen to the details of this case. This is a local case that we're covering in the Lower Mainland in Surrey, and we want you guys to just think if you're a cousin, or maybe you were a girlfriend or an acquaintance, or maybe you were one of the people that was involved in this, and 13 and a half years, maybe you've had a change of heart. Maybe you want to come forward. You can always remain anonymous, but this is going to be something that helps this family that we're about to talk about have some kind of closure. We know that it will never bring their loved one back, but at least they will be able to move forward in their lives with a sense of justice. So with that, we will hop right into the episode. It was Easter Sunday on April 24th, 2011, in the Surrey area of Newton. Parents Wayne and Cynthia had 2 sons, Brandon, who was their eldest, and Devon, who was their youngest. The close-knit Allaire-Bell family had resided in this Surrey area for majority of their two sons' lives.
This Easter was a bit different for the family. Normally, Cynthia would always make a big traditional Easter dinner, but their older son, Brandon, would not be home this year as he was away celebrating his girlfriend's birthday. The Vancouver Canucks were also playing in the playoffs for the Stanley Cup, so they decided to ditch the traditional cooking and head over to Boston Pizza for dinner.
In Brandon's place was Devon's best friend, Jack. Jack and Devon had basically been inseparable since about the age of 8, but met even earlier around the age of 4. Jack was usually, if not always, somewhere getting up to something with Devon or at the Allaire-Bell residence. He was basically their third son. After they finished dinner, Devon and Jack were going to house sit for Jack's older sister, who was also away for the weekend. Devon hugged both parents and in typical Devon fashion, told them he loved them, as he always did, and said he would see them later.
Brandon had returned from his trip to Oregon to find an empty house. Wayne and Cynthia were still out watching the Vancouver Canucks playoff game, and he knew Devon would be with Jack. As the night grew later, Cynthia, Wayne, and Brandon all went to bed. Around 4 a.m., Brandon was awoken by a phone call. It was the RCMP. They let Brandon know they were at the door. Call it Big Brother's intuition, but Brandon knew it had something to do with Devon. He figured instead of waking his parents up at that hour, he would just deal with it himself. When he greeted the 2 police officers at the door, they insisted he wake his parents up.
The officers sat the Day's family down in their living room and told them that their son Devon had been killed the night before and that his best friend Jack was in the hospital in critical condition. Now, we know this must have been the worst moment in their lives, and trying to make sense of something so horrible happening to someone so loved is unfathomable. But 13 and a half years later, there is still no resolution to this tragedy, and this case remains unsolved. So like we said, there's that certain phase of grief when you don't know who took your loved one, right? Like, you're constantly going to be wondering and thinking, like, if I was murdered, like, you would, I know you would go and you would be out and you would be probably searching the streets trying to,
I mean, if I could even get up at that
Exactly,
point, like
yeah.
that's the thing, is it's so devastating. When you're raising children, there's little worries that enter your mind all the time. Is my child safe here? Is my child safe there?
From the minute they're born,
Yeah.
You're checking for them are they breathing every 5 seconds when they're newborns? And then, are kids being nice to them at school, or if they're not out? And you wouldn't go to sleep until I got home. I mean, you wouldn't. I had to wake you up when I got home and turn off Nancy Grace. I think we've talked about this before, but, and we talk about that burden that always falls on families to seek justice. Of course, if something happened to my child, heaven forbid, I feel so deeply for these parents and for these families, but I hope that I never know what they're experiencing.
I was just going to say that.
But it never gets easier talking to these people and talking to these families.
Well, and you can see when you're speaking to the families that have lost a loved one, which we do a lot. I mean, you do mainly, but it's such a change in who they are. You've lost a part of yourself.
Yeah.
So we talk about the burden, that falls on them, but it's just constant to have to, wonder who did this to your baby. You never stop thinking about it.
Never.
Ever.
I'm sure, like even for us in each case we research, it affects me in my sleep, in my everything, thinking about these families and thinking about what we can do to help these families.
Well, and I even follow the people that have been released so early, like we did the case where the guy's just living in Alberta. He's out living. And I even follow his partner and look, to see where he is.
And imagine that's
Still.
not even anything
And that's not
to do
even
with
someone
you.
that I knew.
Exactly.
Like always, we're going to tell you about who Devon was to the people who loved him most. And we're hoping to get some help from you guys on this one. We know we have a large platform and a lot of local listeners. Even the smallest detail can help to bring these people to justice.
Devon Michael John Allaire-Bell was born on October 15th, 1991. His father, Wayne Bell, was from the village of Masset in the Haida Gwaii region of BC and is of Haida heritage. He moved to Vancouver in his mid-20s looking for more than what his small town had to offer. Mom, you understand that?
Yeah, I do.
Cynthia Allaire was from Verdun, Quebec, and moved to BC in 1984. The two met at a club called Sneaky Pete's in 1985 and were married by 1986.
They welcomed their first son, Brandon, in 1989, and 2.5 years later, they welcomed their second son, Devon. The family was close-knit. They moved to Surrey before Devon was born and lived in the complex Epsom Downs, which I'm sure some of you listening live in Epsom Downs.
Yeah.
It's a big complex. As brothers so close in age usually are, the boys were very close, each other's first best friends. Devon idolized his big brother and wanted to do everything he did, which can be annoying.
Sometimes, yeah.
You know
Speaking
that
from,
one.
we're both the eldest, right? So
Yeah.
that's like, oh, fuck, leave me alone.
We're
But
both the torturers of the
yes,
family.
and that's the thing, right? I think that's well, even look at Kirsten Kienna. It's like they have a 10-year age difference and he still pokes and pokes and pokes, tries to get a reaction. But she loves everything about him, even though she pretends like she doesn't. Like his mom recalls watching the two playing Nintendo and Devon just getting up out of nowhere and going over and kissing Brandon. Like he really loved his big brother. And as the kids grew, they made many friends in the complex. Jack also lived here, and when the two were old enough to start a friendship, they were always together. As Devon got older, he and his brother remained close, but as does happen, Devon started to find his own identity. Sometimes brothers can bug and bicker, but there was no love lost between the two. Growing up in a complex, there are so many other kids. He and Jack were always doing complex kid stuff, which I also grew up in a complex. And I grew up in a low-income housing complex where, it's a lot of like marginalized, it's like one big marginalized community. These kids are all just out. They don't have to worry about what their parents are going through. They have no idea what's going on. They're just out doing fun stuff.
Like from the time they get up in the morning
yes,
until it's time.
Until my mom
to come
whistles
in.
off the balcony. That was everyone would be like, Danica, your mom's whistling off the balcony. So you could find them doing parkour, making forts in the forest, wrestling, basically doing anything active, and also playing Nicky Nicky Nine Doors, which was one of my favorites, and using throwing stars, which Devon's mom was not happy about when she found out almost a year later. He had many friends in the complex and had many female admirers from the sounds of it.
Devon went to Bear Creek Elementary from kindergarten to grade 7. He made many lasting friendships there. For high school, he attended Frank Hurt High School, which was just a short walk from home. Devon was very involved in martial arts from a young age. He started when he was 5. Taekwondo, and eventually made it to his brown belt through the Sun Hang Do Academy. Being involved in martial arts, Bushido was also important to Devon. According to Inatso Nitobi's book, Bushido, the lives of samurai warriors were ruled by 7 principles called Bushido. These 7 rules were righteousness, loyalty, honor, respect, honesty, courage, and consistency. He held these values high in his life.
Devon loved working out and basically excelled at anything active. He had many friends. All his friends that I spoke with echoed the same thing about Devon. He was a great listener. He was sensitive and caring and would always be a shoulder to lean on. He was loyal and honest, and it was really hard to be anything but happy when you were with him because he had a smile and a laugh that was just contagious, and it made you forget anything else that was going on. He was also a no bullshit kind of guy and said it how it was, which, sometimes can start problems, but Cynthia, the mother, said she's very much like that as well.
And as someone who's also like that, I can appreciate it.
And also have a child that's like that. He was the kind of guy that if he saw something he didn't agree with, he would voice it. He was loved by everyone who knew him. But with that being said, navigating the world as a teenager, as we both know, can be tough sometimes. Giving your parents a hard time is really just part of the process, with typical teenage stuff like getting caught sneaking through his bedroom window. In school, Devon had a run-in with another student that led to an after-school fight being planned, which led to him being expelled from the school. The other kid that started it really had no repercussions. And I've been there, Mom.
Yep.
People start a fight with me. I kick their ass. It was really...
And then you're the one that gets in trouble.
I'm the one that got in trouble.
Yeah,
exactly.
every time.
So he then took some time off school, but he went and finished high school at Newton Learning Center. He got his dogwood and graduated in 2010.
After graduation, Devon tried his hand at some different things. He went to Kwantlen College for masonry, but that wasn't for him. He started roofing with his brother, but that also wasn't for him. He wasn't the biggest fan of the heat.
Have you ever seen a roofer? Because they're all so tanned.
They look like they have been tanning in Hawaii with no sunscreen on. He got a job at Golden Bakery on Annis's Island, and he really seemed to like it. In March of 2011, the family took a trip to Masset for the end of the winter feast that was held by Wayne's nephew. There, the boys were immersed in their Haida culture, and they really embraced their heritage. Devon, on that trip, was given his Haida name, Git Hagens, which translates to boy with loud voice. Brandon and Devon were adopted by one of the foremost carvers from Masset, Robert Davidson, into his Eagle clan. He was very proud of his heritage. He even changed his hometown on Facebook to Masset.
And he was actually born in Vancouver, so it wasn't even really his hometown, but that's how deeply he felt connected.
Yeah, well, it's such a connected thing to go back somewhere that has so much meaning and so much spirituality, you know?
Well, even you and I lived up in the Queen Charlotte's, which is Haida Gwaii. We lived there for a summer, and even just being there, the energy is so different.
Yeah,
I mean,
you still remember it, and you think you were 4.
Yeah. And
summer before you started kindergarten.
So very impactful. While there, Wayne recalls having many moments with his sons that he will forever hold on to. Just over a month later, Devon and Jack were saying their goodbyes to Wayne and Cynthia at the Boston Pizza. They went over to Jack's sister's house, had a few beers, rolled a few doobies, and headed over to the Frank Kurt field to kick around the soccer ball. While they were there, a few kids that the pair didn't know came out from the trail. Being belligerent, swearing, and flashing gang signs, the boys started to approach the pair. They started to taunt the two and were also trying to take their soccer ball. Jack, like Devon, was a no-bullshit kind of guy. After he had enough, he went up to the group and basically end the issue, and Devon followed. What ensued next is hazy, as the group started physically fighting. Devon and Jack, both having backgrounds in martial arts, could really hold their own. And in the Bushido style that the two tried to implement in their lives, figured a fight was a fight. Fists and some mutual respect. Jack remembers fighting, and out of the corner of his eye saw 2 other young males emerge from the bushes. Jack said the young kids were kicking him in the groin, and that's when he realized that the Bushido that he lived by was not in everyone's rulebook. He then noticed from the corner of his eye Devon slinking away slowly, which was very out of character. It also made him look down and realize that he had been stabbed multiple times. He followed Devon as he started to piece together that Devon was also hurt. Running on adrenaline, he ran to Devon and was followed by the group. Jack threw himself onto Devon. They then started to kick and stab the two and also unloaded a full can of bear mace onto the pair.
Ugh.
The group started to leave the field, but when Jack realized that his jacket with his cell phone was where they started the fight, he panicked as he ran towards it to get his phone to call for help. The kids were scared as Jack chased them. He was worried they would try to steal his jacket and that he wouldn't have any ability to call for help. Jack ran, and the kids at that time imagined seeing a guy who you just stabbed running after you. They did look afraid, and Jack said they looked very afraid. But when they realized that he was just going to get his jacket, they started fingering him and yelling things at him. At 8:36, Jack called for help and sat there with Devon as he clung on to life. Ambulances arrived and did all they could, but sadly, Devon succumbed to his injuries. He was stabbed multiple times, but once to the heart. This was the fatal stab that took Devon's life. Jack was also stabbed multiple times in many vital organs and has had to have multiple life-saving surgeries that he is still dealing with the aftermath of today.
Devon's celebration of life was attended by over 500 people. There were so many people they couldn't fit everyone inside. They actually had to live stream it. Wayne Devon's dad, drove transit for a long time, even before the boys were born. Transit sent 3 buses to do a memorial procession drive to the funeral home.
So sad because Wayne said, so just to give you guys some background, I've spoken to Wayne, Cynthia, the mother, Jack, the best friend, and a few of his other close friends and some girls that he dated. And, just to get a well-rounded idea of who Devon was as a person. Obviously, you have to ask the people who knew him and loved him best, right? And when he was talking about the 3 buses driving to the funeral home, Wayne said that the energy was just like
palpable.
I
have goosebumps right now, actually. Just hearing about it.
I've had goosebumps for the last 3 weeks as I've literally researched this. Exactly.
Devon was laid to rest in Masset next to his great-grandfather, as well as at Valley View in Surrey. In May 2011,
okay.
The family was invited to Damesh Darbar Sikh Temple at 85th Avenue and 128th Street in Newton to make a plea to the community.
What we didn't say, sorry to cut you off, is the 5 suspects in this, which we will get to after, are believed to be South Asian males, young South Asian males. So going to this temple, which was one of the largest temples in the area, they were hoping that somebody would recognize these kids and bring them forward.
In that same month, on May 5th, Cynthia and Wayne made a public appeal for any information. They were sitting there with his ashes in a box and pleading for the parents of these kids to turn them in. Cynthia was angry. She's still angry.
She's angry, and it's so sad because, Wayne talks about it and she talks about it differently, and there's other things I've seen. Basically, the day that Devon died, she died with him. And like you said, right? I feel so deeply for her as a mother because, I don't even know what I would do in that position, but it's easy to say I would continue on for them and be strong, but you don't know until you are in that position. And, obviously she has a close relationship with both of her children, but there's always, there's going to be one child that's more like you, that you kind of connect to, it's a different way. And her and Devon were very much the same and very connected. And I think Wayne and Brandon are very, connected, and they've used exercise and they work out. That's their therapy. They're able to do other things. But Cynthia worked at the Costco, which was in the middle of Newton, which, again, imagine returning to work and thinking, like we said, this person is here. What if this person is shopping? What if this person is, you don't know. And so for her, I know that she's really closed off to the world, because how can you have faith in a world that has taken your baby from you like that in such a...
I can't even, I can't even fathom it. So much love and time goes into growing and raising your kids, and then someone's careless act just takes them away in a second.
Exactly. As a parent, really, when you have children, you're responsible for teaching them about the world. And yes, for protecting them in a way. But when you protect your child from consequence and accountability, you are not doing them a service. You are doing them a disservice. Kids need to know that there are consequences, especially for something like that, for taking somebody's life. And you don't think that at the end of the day, this person or these people involved are going to be fucked up.
Yeah, I'm sure they're haunted by it every single day.
Exactly.
Unless they're complete psychopaths.
Which they could be. They totally could be.
They did do this and they have never come forward.
That's the thing. For me, I know when my kids are lying. I know, which one of them doesn't ever, but the other one probably will. But, lying, tired, something's bothering them, they're sad, they're mad. You know everything about your child. So if your child came home from being involved in something as heinous as this, don't you think it would affect them? And another thing is, I don't think, you see groups of kids hang out. Not all these kids come from the same home. They don't come from the same place. They didn't experience the same life. If one of those kids is a psychopath, I guarantee you not all of them are. So that's where we're kind of pleading with anybody, just because you were there, you can still come forward. At this time, you would have been a young offender. It looked like these kids were young, maybe 17, 16, 17,
yeah,
18.
They do look young.
Maybe in their 20s. We don't know. But in Canada, young offenders are protected. Like, we wouldn't even be able to say their names even if we knew
it. Yeah.
And so nothing would have probably happened to them anyway. They probably would have gotten 2 years in jail where they could have learned and grown. But no, instead they've gone to live their life and have this probably affect them in ways where it's taking them to either down one path or another. And I can guarantee you these paths are not good paths to be on.
And there is footage.
Mm-hmm.
In July of 2011, footage of the whole group was released to the public.
Yes, and you can pretty clearly, like, I think it would be really easy for them to know, and that's another thing we'll get to, actually, because they being law enforcement, has actually told the family that they are aware of who a few of these kids are, which we'll get back to that. The whole community came together after the loss of Devon. Frankhurt Secondary, where this horrible tragedy took place. So imagine it's some of your best years, you're in high school, you live right there, you're constantly there, and then that's where you're murdered. So Frankhurt Secondary and Newton Learning Center, where Devon graduated from, both have bursaries that they present in his honor. In 2014, the park where Devon's murderers fled was reclaimed and cleaned up in his honor as well. A playground was built, larger sidewalks were put in, and brighter lights were also put in. Robert Davidson, who had adopted the boys into his Eagle clan, dedicated a beautiful piece of art to the park, and that was also dedicated to Devon's life. The piece can be seen from all points when you drive by. It is called Eagle Calling.
That also, I have such goosebumps still.
I know. And it's a beautiful sculpture.
It is.
It was apparent when I spoke with Jack that Jack's guilt is very heavy. But Devon was loyal, and Jack would have been right behind him if the roles were reversed. And that's the thing. Like, when I think of this, I literally get so emotional, like, on both sides. Because I have 2 friends, my best friends, are from the 2nd grade and the 3rd grade.
I know.
They're your road dogs, man. You ride for them. Like, if you ride, I ride. That's, like, how it goes, you know? And Jack mentioned, you know, we were naive. We figured everybody is with Bushido. Everyone has honor. And why would you think that this random stranger is going to stab you and kill you and try to kill you? You know, you don't even think that of your enemy.
I mean, that never even entered their minds.
No. But like we said, these boys have never been publicly identified or brought to justice. And clearly they were looking for trouble, because you don't carry around knives, weapons, bear mace. They were also on foot and looked to be just kind of literally walking all over the place. Like, let me tell you, these kids got their steps in that day because they were all over. And Devon and Jack were basically at the wrong place at the wrong time, and these kids had an agenda that somebody was going to fill.
Well, that day, the 5 of them, when they did the investigation, they determined that the suspects were on foot for an extended time frame. They are walking northbound on the King George Boulevard at 64th at approximately 7:30 p.m. They continued north on King George Boulevard and walked through the Esso gas station, the one at 72nd in King George.
So this is where all the footage is from.
And at approximately 7:50 p.m., they entered the McDonald's restaurant on 72nd, which is just west of King George. They then crossed King George to 137th Street and continued to travel northbound on 137 in the direction of Frankhurt High School, where the 911 call was received at 8:36. It is believed that the suspects fled southwest through the park area that leads to 76th Avenue. Over the years, the family has made many public appeals for information on these suspects. Someone knows something.
Mm-hmm. Well, 5 people, you don't go out looking for, like, you're not all 5 people are going out looking for that kind of trouble.
Well, and now hopefully they can have some hindsight and maturity.
Well, I'm not the same person I even was 5 years ago.
No.
So I couldn't imagine, like, because even when it comes to me in high school, okay, obviously I was a scrapper. I loved to scrap and fight. I loved it. But most of the time I was defending myself. But there were a few times, it's funny the way the world works. One of one of Devon's friends I actually spoke to, I don't even think I told you this, I actually showed up one time at her school to fight her. But now, you know, we've both had children. We both grow. I'm like a completely different person than I was when I was a teenager.
Of course.
So decisions that you make, and that's the thing, when you mature and you grow, you can have that hindsight and say like, oh shit, what was I thinking? And when kids are, especially boys, right? There's ego, there's testosterone raging. There's also like a crew, like a mob mentality that if your friend's doing one thing, you're going to have to do it too. And I always try to explain that to my son, like, do not be a follower. But when you're in that situation, you know, maybe you just watch them do this to this kid. You're scared that they're going to do something to you. You don't know. But as you grow, maybe they have children now of their own. You know, maybe they have had someone in their family taken from them now, and they can have that insight of what it feels like to have somebody ripped away from you like that.
Well, and that's just it. Like, to be able to identify and to be able to realize that what you did was real and it affected someone that loved this person so much for the rest of their lives. Maybe you're listening and you were involved. If you were, the right thing to do is come forward and identify yourself, turn yourself in, and the others. There is no street code that you didn't already violate. Young people glamorize this life, but what kind of person are you?
And that's the thing. I've been there. I've glamorized that. I loved music about selling drugs and this and that and all that stuff. And, you know, obviously, when you are so young and you're so impressionable and, you know, your friends are into this, your friends are into that, you're going to be a follower at some points, right? And then when you grow and you change, which everybody is supposed to do, we know that some people are stunted by trauma, by the way they were raised, by the things they're surrounded by, right? You get acclimated to a certain way of living. But if you are actually on a train of growth and growing and insight and healing, like, now's time to do the right thing.
And you'll never feel at rest or be able to forget this.
Never.
If
Never.
you don't
This will
get it
stick
off
with
your
you.
conscience.
Yep. So like we said, the 5 suspected murderers are South Asian, but we don't know for sure if all of them are. If you see them in the videos, we'll also post the video, a clip from the video which shows all of them. They were all wearing tracksuits. So they're all wearing tracksuits with hoods on except one kid. And the one kid, they said that he had a really unique military style haircut, which I'm sorry, that is not unique. Anybody that knows, everyone and their fucking dog had that haircut at that time.
True story.
So one had a sweater with really large writing on the back. One was wearing a hat. Apparently one of them was a little fuller in the face, if you know what I mean. And a lot of the other ones were quite skinny. And yeah, I mean, again, we don't know. Maybe some of them could have been South Asian. Some of them could have been, there's so many mixes. You don't know who's who these days or
and
who's
Surrey's
what.
such a multicultural place. Like,
exactly.
And the schools that I'm assuming they probably were still in school at this time.
Mm-hmm. Some of them, for sure.
Yeah.
So there has been obviously some rumors, right? We know that in the rumor mill, especially after something like this happens, people talk. So what we really would like is anything you've heard, even if you think it couldn't be helpful, like, come forward. So some people have talked about how maybe the kids, because obviously they were protected by either their parents were trying to protect them and totally did the wrong thing, or they're completely out of touch with their children, which could also be.
Yeah, that I was just thinking it could also be the case.
Right?
Sure.
We've talked about immigrant parents working 45 jobs and doing all of this to give their kids better lives. But when you're an absent parent and you're just funding this, that could also really sour really quickly.
Yeah.
So some people think that they fled back to their home countries or where their parents were from and maybe returned using like cousins' passports, because apparently that happens. Another thing is, in that community alone in Surrey, over the last 10 years, there have been a lot of murders perpetrated by other people in these communities. So young gangsters, which I don't even like to call them that because, I don't know,
Like it's glamorizing it.
Exactly. They're people who get involved in gangs or groups, and they all have just been killing each other. We've seen it, right? They're going around shooting each other. So that's another rumor, is that, some of these kids have been killed, which if they stuck in that lifestyle, 100% they probably could be killed or in jail.
Or in jail, yeah.
Not for very long, probably. That they moved away, or that they were related to the police or someone in law enforcement and they're being protected that way, which we obviously hate to say that, but you never know. We talk about all the things we actually uncover during the research, and another thing is a lot of people have speculated that Devon's case has not been solved because he is Indigenous. Now, I hope that that's not the case, but we have seen systemic racism time and time again. I hate bringing up Picton, but how many women from marginalized communities, how many of those women were Indigenous? And how much shit have we seen uncovered and unearthed about the way that law enforcement, it's disgusting, the way that law enforcement treated them because of their Indigenous background.
Well, even the whole murdered, missing...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a movement.
The whole movement is, there wouldn't be a movement if it wasn't happening.
No, and that's the thing, the bloody handprint on the mouth, it's because, we won't be quiet. No one can silence us, right? And not us, I'm not Indigenous, but I like to think I'm an advocate and an ally for people because I believe everybody is worthy of justice, especially when their lives are taken for these reasons. These kids didn't even know him.
Yeah, so there was no reason.
No. And that's another thing. When someone is obviously, if you live a higher risk lifestyle and you're putting yourself into these higher risk positions, that's still not, you don't deserve to be murdered because you get in a car with a stranger. We know that people are crazy, and mental health is definitely something that a lot of people need to take more seriously. But at the end of the day, that doesn't make it right for somebody to take your life, no matter what you're doing. And when you're kicking a soccer ball around with your friend smoking a doobie, that's the last thing you're looking for.
Exactly. Or the last thing you expect is going to happen to you. We know that rumors are just that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes rumors can be true. Kids don't shut up. Someone knows something.
Well, and especially these kids, I don't know them, but they just look to me like the kind of kids that either would be, kids in general, you're going to gloat, you're going to brag. And especially if it's been 13 and a half years and you've had absolutely nothing come from this, what's stopping you from being gloating and bragging?
Or people get drunk, people get high. And, and you're
probably getting high all the time if you fucking killed somebody.
Well, and I've said stuff to people when I'm drunk, that you wake up in the morning and you're like, oh my God, what did I say? So,
I don't drink
sure.
for 10 years almost. And that really was because... Same thing. I would do things when I was drunk, say things when I was drunk that were not who I was.
Yeah. So somebody has gotten drunk and said something to someone. Mm-hmm. If you've been drunk with a friend and they've told you, even if you think it could just be them talking out their ass, call in an anonymous tip.
Yep. And as messed up as it is, and again, blame our justice system, the police have told the family that they are aware of some of these kids and that they do not live a law-abiding lifestyle. So basically, we can't get them for this, but sit and wait patiently and they'll mess up again.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. Imagine being told this.
I can't even wrap my head around it.
No. In 2018, then Corporal Frank Jang of IHIT said that some of the individuals have been identified. We believe we know who some of them are, but we need to know who all of them are. We need to know all of them that were involved in this tragic act and to determine exactly what their individual roles were.
Which is fucked up. Even the people being stabbed, when you're being stabbed, you don't know exactly, you don't break it down into discriminative stimuli. This person raised the knife and this person
and Jack
didn't.
Actually does not know who stabbed him.
Yeah.
But do you remember the girl we met in Florida? Mm-hmm. This girl, we've told this story before, but she was our waitress, or she was our hostess. She sat us, and we had all of our Murder with Our Mother stuff on, and she was like, oh, what are you guys in town for? And we told her, we're here for a murder, convention, basically, true crime. She looked like she was about to faint and said, I was just got out of jail for 10 years. And we're like, what?
Yeah.
Then Mom and I were just sitting outside our hotel, which was not like far from the restaurant, but with another chair empty there. And who walks by but this girl?
And she told us all about what had happened. And the fact was, she wasn't even the person that murdered someone, but she was in
there.
the car when it happened.
There. She freaking was in jail for 10. She gave birth to one of her children in jail. And we can't even, like, I'm sorry, but if you just sat these kids down, have you never watched an episode of First 48? Get them some good food and they'll crack.
And even if they do blame each other, well, fuck, whatever. At least you got the
5
people.
And you got them all and charged them.
And I mean, the fact that they were so young, they're all going to do the same amount of time anyway. Like,
yeah, that's the thing. And now, instead of justice, it's been 13 and a half years. So how can they not be apprehended? I don't understand. Like, how would it be? It would be so easy to crack them and give them a couple more names. Kids are scared. Kids are so scared of stuff like that. And like we said, not all of them, I guarantee you, set out to kill somebody that day. Now, if they are hardened criminals, how easy would that be? Now, 13 and a half years later.
Well, they've had the opportunity to become so because they were not ever turned around when, you know, this incident occurred. So.
Exactly. And you know, like we've said 5 times already, you know they had to be affected. No matter how hard you think you are, when you take a life, that's going to affect you in some way or another. And they either went one way or another. So that's the thing. If you want to make changes, if you have made changes, if you're a different person than you were back then, turn yourself in. So we will post the surveillance footage, like we said. We are pleading with you guys to share this episode. Share it so that we can put an end to the chapter of this family's grief, give them answers and the answers that they need to at least move forward. We know that this won't bring Devon back, but just putting this back in the public's thoughts.
And that's why we're doing this episode, is because it has been such a long time and it needs to be brought back up, because this is not the way it should be. It shouldn't just be forgotten and for these people to just get away and for the families to have to live with this not knowing of who killed Devon.
Yeah. And now, I mean, if you look, every single thing, yes, it's been 13 and a half years, but, you know, like Wayne and Cynthia, now they have grandbabies. Their eldest son got married and all these things. And there's all these, you know, there's happy moments. But in the background of every happy moment is always going to be sadness. Sadness that Devon should be here. Devon should be an uncle. Devon should be getting married himself. Devon should be all these things, right? He should be there with them, laughing, loving. There were so many people that were so touched by Devon that apparently at his celebration of life, multiple people came up to Wayne and Cynthia and said, you know, one time I was just sitting on the sidewalk crying and Devon came up to me and just sat there and listened. And that's what echoes for me, is he was a listener and an old soul. And you really have to be selfless and engaged with people and different. Like, a lot of people don't listen. They are just too busy thinking about what they're going to say and how they're going to answer. Not enough people sit and listen. And even Cynthia said from the moment he was born, he was like that.
What a gift he was.
It is. It's a gift. And that's where, you know, I really, really wish this family some kind of closure. And I know it will happen. I'm very, you know, feeling good about it. And obviously this took me down kind of like a wormhole where, you guys know, we like to do our own investigating, or we probably wouldn't have this podcast. But I found a guy who maybe was involved. Obviously, I'm not going to say his name because I know the rules. But sadly, this is not the only family that's dealing with this circumstance, right? There are so many loopholes in our Canadian justice system, one being the Young Offenders Act. And I think really just opening that conversation of having a good relationship with your children, teaching them empathy, teaching them all these different emotions, being there, being present, making sure they're not out with their friends, stabbing people. You don't know, like when you think it's so cool to carry a knife around or carry this or fight this person. Like I said, I've been there. I never did that, but fighting, and you know, you don't know. You could literally hit someone too hard. They could fall. They could hit their head. They could bleed out and die right there. Just because
And you can't take that back.
You can't. And you don't know when you're stabbing someone as a kid or a young person or even old people. I don't think half the people I know have taken an anatomy class. You know, you don't know where organs are or vital arteries or anything. So when you're willy-nilly stabbing kids,
well,
right?
And I think too, the thing is, like, I know one thing I struggled with when you were going through your stuff as a young teenager was it's important to remain close to your teenager even when you don't like them, even when they're doing things that you're taking personally. My biggest piece of advice to every parent now that's going through having a teenager, like you were someone that was, you know, very precocious. You were getting up to all sorts of stuff.
Oh, horrible.
You were acting like you hated my guts. And, you know, so much of me just wanted to be like, fuck off.
Yeah. Well, you probably think you did.
Well, I think I did say
said
fuck
that
off
a few times.
But I mean, at the same
good
time,
reason.
at the same time, you have to realize that even though your child is so terrible right now, keep being there for them. Keep unconditionally loving them. Of course, give them consequences, and consequences are love.
Yes, but even just having a conversation with them.
Exactly.
Not everything has to resolve in punishment.
No, and you think they're not even listening to you, but they are listening. And when they come back to you and you can help them get through that period of their lives without damaging another human being, without killing another human being, without ending up on drugs or in jail or, you know, some of the various other things that can happen if you're absent from their lives.
Exactly. There's so many studies that show if you have a good relationship in your household, that the rest of the world is very easy to navigate. Obviously, the world's not kind. The world is not all these things. You know, everyone I talked to said that Wayne and Cynthia, Brandon and Devon, they were the closest family. They had done it the right way. They raised these kids the right way. But then some shithead who wasn't raised the right way, you know, came in and just
took it all away.
Exactly. So talk to your kids, be there for your kids. Teenagehood is so confusing and hard to navigate already with all the social pressures. And I can't imagine now with TikTok and, you know, we were just getting Facebook. I think I was in like the 9th grade, but thank God it wasn't around really. It wasn't the same where everyone was literally, there was no smartphones then. It was like you had to literally log onto your desktop and go on to Facebook and MSN and all those things. And there was still bullying. There was still all that stuff. But the social pressures now of how you have to look, how you have to be, how you have to, even like the overdoses, you know, talking. I have a 14-year-old nephew and it's like just taking the time. He literally says to me like, oh my gosh, I love how you just listen to me. You listen and I am very transparent. You know that. I'll tell them everything I did because I'm no longer living like that because I have hindsight because now, you know, again, I haven't drank in 10 years. I've made many different decisions than the younger version of me would have made. And most of that has been for the better of my life, for you, right? You don't have to stress about if you're going to pick me up from the drunk tank or if I got tasered.
It's been really nice not picking you up from the drunk tank for the last 10 years.
Yeah, it's been
enjoyed
nice. But, you know, that's the thing. If you're there for your kids, they have a safe place with you. Not everything needs to result in a punishment. You don't always need to. Sometimes kids are acting out in these ways because they want you to listen to them and you're not. So they do these drastic things, right? But we need to nip that in the bud. Is that the saying? It's one of my old people saying.
I feel like you're an 85-year-old woman sometimes.
I might be.
So we know that someone knows something. So we're pleading with you guys that anyone with information is asked to call the Surrey RCMP at 604-599-0502. Or if you want to remain anonymous, Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. Or you can also contact IHIT at 1-877-551-IHIT.
Which is 44... Well, I'm trying to figure it out. 8. Oh, no. I hit 4448.
Perfect.
Sorry, because whenever people say that, I'm like, well, what's the number?
And obviously we have reached out to IHIT as well. And it's an older case that hasn't been, you know, like there's been such a change of hands, like in any operation.
There's been 5 different sergeants since Devon was murdered.
Yeah.
So, and think of the technological advances that have happened since that, even the cameras. Like, so the sergeant from IHIT did call me back. Didn't think that was going to happen because they were quite concerned with our podcast name when I left a message. But he did say that even navigating the surveillance videos, even trying to get into those old files is like, it's like a dinosaur. Because 14 years almost, that's a lot. And look at what we've done in the last 14 years, technologically speaking.
It's been crazy.
It has. And so he will be in contact. We did speak also to kind of like a prolific crime reporter, kind of picked her brain on like who she thinks would be involved. Because again, based on what the Sergeant Frank Jang had said was like, oh no, we know who they are, and they will basically, they'll do something else.
No, they'll kill somebody else.
Yeah.
Like, fuck.
And the one person that I was looking into, again, it was very evident that person has stayed on that path and has, you know, is very involved in selling drugs, very involved in just randomly assaulting people, which I don't know.
I mean, perhaps if he is involved, his mental health has been so compromised by the things he's done in the past.
Well, it seems his mental health probably was compromised before, like, because you don't do that to somebody if you're not, else is not going on, whether it was his home life, family life. We know some households are very toxic, abusive. Yeah. You know, if that's what's normalized to you and you go around and you are doing the same thing you're witnessing at home, that is what we see a lot of the time.
Yep.
So obviously, again, we can't name any names, but you guys can, and you guys can come forward, those numbers. And again, you can remain anonymous. There's actually one of the articles I was reading, there is a $2,000 reward. So times are tough. If maybe you guys need, you know, a little extra money and you know you have something that
1 week's groceries.
Yeah, 1 week, exactly. Gas and groceries for a week. But if you guys really know something, we beg you to come forward. Again, if you want to remain anonymous, the Crime Stoppers number is 1-800-222-8477. And you actually wouldn't even have to testify in court. That's what it said on there. I don't know. Sometimes the justice system says one thing and then another thing happens. But do the right thing. Come forward. Give this family what they need to move forward. And yeah, so.
We'll be releasing, obviously we record ahead of time, but the day that this comes out would have been Devon's birthday.
33rd birthday. So happy birthday in heaven, Devon. And to his family, thank you guys so much. His family, his friends, Jack. Again, this is something that the family has to live with, but for your best friend to die in your arms, that is something that never is going to ever leave you, and especially your lifelong best friend. And it seems that Jack is living a very, you know, changed, like he's just trying to stay on the right path and trying to really, you know, like
get the most out of life.
Yeah, he's doing jujitsu and he's not really drinking, and he's just really trying to live a good life. And he says he often wonders what Devon would be like, and he knows that they would still be the best of friends. So he can carry his memory with him. And I think a little bit of closure, because Jack is a living victim, right? So imagine, it's one thing to imagine someone that did this to your loved one, but imagine someone that did this to you.
Yeah.
Right? So again, guys, thank you so much for listening and continuing to listen. You guys know we try to get our episodes out at least once a month. We aim for every 2 weeks, but that's just like a bonus when we get one of those. So there's a lot going on. Mom was on her trip and I was on my trip, and we were kind of all over, and now it's kind of winter winter solstice.
Now we'll be able to put more effort into releasing on time.
Yeah.
So we say.
So we say. I know. It's kind of like the running joke at Murder with My Mother. You can hear Dan in the background laughing right now. Dan knows when I come out of the woodworks to be like, hey, Dan, can we record this day? He's probably like, oh, my God. But yeah, so if you guys are not already, keep up with our socials. Instagram, we will be posting all the photos that we spoke about today. And we are on every platform you can think of. If you want to catch us on Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music. I think there's like 85 million podcast platforms, but we're on all of them. So YouTube.
Share us, like us, subscribe,
follow us on Patreon, donate if you feel the need to help the show. It is a Murder with My Mother podcast at patreon.com/Murder with My Mother podcast, and on all the other socials, Murder with My Mother podcast. So with that, we will see you guys for episode 60.
Woo!
Can you believe that? 60 episodes. Holy, we can never believe anything. Like, are you even real? Is this even real life? But yeah, 60. So I think we have a pretty good idea of what we're going to do for 60.
You guys will not even believe it. So
you won't even believe it. Do you guys ever believe it?
It'll be IRL, episode 60.
Are we doing a video for that one? I don't even think we are. I think
we're
sticking to audio for now. Like I said, I don't have time to do all that other stuff. But happy Thanksgiving, which would have just happened, everybody. And keep your families close. Tell your family you love them. And squeeze them tight.
Kids, be good to your parents.
Yes, kids, be good to your parents. And parents, be good to your kids, because you're the one that's setting them out in the world. So with that, this was episode 59 of Murder with My Mother, the true crime podcast, where I talk murder with my mother.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.